What's up, everybody? I keep getting sidetracked into different little rabbit holes here, so I better just go ahead and start making this video. Maybe I'll talk about the so-called satellite dishes at another time, but let's talk about the satellites themselves. Y'all ever seen a crashed Skybird? Thing looks pretty clean for, burning up in the atmosphere, right? Well, that's because it fell from a balloon and not space. Now, I do have to start off by saying this. There's something up there that is very high up, moves very fast. I've seen it countless times out in the desert at night, where you can see planes, you know what a plane looks like. It's way higher and way faster than that. That being said, a lot of this Skybird activity that we're talking about is just balloons. MonkeyWorks points these out from time to time when they have their transponders on. So when Sputnik launched, it was a little 2-foot round metal ball, and people were freaked out because they could literally see it fly over America. They say there are 8,000 active satellites and like 30,000 defunct ones. And strangely enough, none of these have ever been hit by a meteorite or anything. And, we see shooting stars hit the atmosphere all the time. And I think that the very little bit of technology that we use satellites for are actually just hanging off these balloons like this big behemoth. I'll get to these in a sec, but I think the majority of so-called satellite technology is just beaming a signal off of the ionosphere. But this is no good for two-way communication. That's where the balloons come in. We have all of these giant dishes pointed up in the air, but are they really communicating with satellites, or are they just bouncing a signal off the ionosphere? And this is really only good for broadcasting. You see how the arrows are all pointing towards the right. That's because it takes an enormous amount of power to transmit a signal, but only a little bit of energy to receive it. With your dish TV, all you have to do is point it towards the southern sky. So let's see, if you were down around Lima, Peru, bouncing a signal towards the north, you could probably cover all of North America. If you just had some kind of ionospheric radio transmitter there called a observatory. This is Haicamarca, right outside of Lima. And right in the name, they are telling you that they are using frequencies within the radio range to bounce off of the ionosphere. And it looks exactly like HAARP in Alaska. There's 18,000 dipole antenna over 85,000 square meters and has over 2 million watts of transmitting power, or about enough to power 33,000 light bulbs. They just outed themselves with something fishy going on here just with that statement. So does all of America's television get beamed in from the high desert mountains of Peru? I don't know, but that's literally all it would take if you're wanting to broadcast a signal one way that can be picked up pretty much anywhere. But if you want a two-way communication and to not have to use 2 million watts, you got to have something more local. And that's where the real satellites come into play here. This one wasn't a communications satellite. This one was a satellite telescope. Everybody's heard of these. They're not flying around millions of miles away. It's just a balloon with a telescope designed to look for distant galaxies from a vantage point high in the Earth's upper atmosphere, where there's less light refraction off of the air molecules. This is where we get actual satellite images and not CGI. We got another crashed satellite balloon in Mexico, February 2019. Another downed bird in the Congo. This is 2022. Another one in Chino Hills out in front of what looks like every single house I built in California while I was there. They all look the same. This was back in the days of third-gen internet, so they were probably having some wireless internet problems that day. And this balloon list goes on and on. I won't bore you with all that. Now, if you look up crashed satellites, guess what? You get the exact same images as all of the balloons that came down. And then some good old CGI. But just look at the size of this long duration balloon with its solar panels to keep everything running, and then its machinery. This is probably why it costs $1 a minute to make a satellite phone call, because there's only a few of these up there. And there's only so much bandwidth available, not tens of thousands of satellites. Now, let me show you a clip from MonkeyWorks. If you're not familiar with him, go check out his channel. I hope he doesn't mind me plugging him and using his clip here, but just listen.
Well, you're not going to see this balloon as it comes across anyway because it doesn't have a transponder on, especially if it's from China. They're not going to go zipping across with a transponder on a balloon, alerting everybody to the location. They're going to try and sneak it on in. Now, as I was just looking at the skies to see what was going on around this time, one of the things that became very obvious to me was the amount of balloons that all of a sudden decided to show their locations, okay? You got them over Hawaii. Notice the high altitude stuff, okay? Right here, right? Up the west coast, near Seattle, Tacoma, like Canadian border, all right? And the icons don't match. That's what I thought was interesting. The icons didn't really match it, but the altitude, 80, 90,000 feet. Again, down south towards Baja. You've got them over the center of the United States. I even found a couple new ones I thought was pretty interesting. Right? But you can see the altitude, 80, 90,000 feet, way, way above any commercial stuff. But look at the amount of balloons, Intel balloons, that are up over the United States, coast to coast, plus the ones you got them in Germany as well.
So if they actually have their transponder on, then he can track them. But there are these clear plastic balloons up there, which I don't know if you guys can remember ever seeing a plane without spraying a tail behind it, but they're hard to spot if there's not a big tail behind it. So a clear balloon at twice the altitude is invisible. And this is why this was such a big deal. I'm sure everybody remembers this. I really wanted to talk about it at the time, but probably shouldn't have. First off, this guy ain't filming at no 90,000 feet. I'll just tell it how it is. They sent up a duplicate and did this for everybody to see. We don't have the technology to hit anything at 90,000 feet. First off, you see those light, drifty clouds there? Those are low clouds. We're talking 5,000 to 6,000 feet, but even the highest clouds are only 10,000 to 25,000 feet. There ain't no way that this thing was up at 90,000 feet. Secondly, the jet flies over it. If they really push it, they can exceed 50,000 feet, but it's far above normal operational range. Next, the missile technology they're using is heat-seeking, and there's not going to be a heat source being put off by this. And finally, I'll just let you watch. You guys want to see that again? Let's see it slow down a little bit more. Yeah, it's exactly what it looks like. It is spitting something out of the side of it, not getting hit by something. This was a big staged theater production at 20,000, 30,000 feet maybe. But everybody saw it, so it must have happened. You know, if there were really thousands of satellites flying over all the time, this wouldn't have been a big deal. But this is the wave of the future because they've sold everybody a fairy tale on what tech they actually have. This one company launches 100 balloons every year. This is just one company. I wonder how many others there are advertised as satellite companies. And if you're thinking I'm some whack job still, well, check this out. In this article from February 2023 about the Aerostar Thunderhead balloon system, they say they're going to attach some thermal imaging sensors and hope to support the firefighting community. Then 6 months later, in September of 2023, Geosat says they're going to equip their satellites with thermal imaging sensors and help monitor things from space. So we've had these things flying over our head for 60 years and nobody thought about this, and then a balloon company beat the satellites in deploying this technology. Static out.